Welcome back to DotLife. We have heard from one side of the White Stadium conversation today, but I'm very excited to bring in a neutral voice from New York State, actually. Astute listeners of the podcast know that I am from the upstate New York area. Mostly I claim Buffalo as home, but I did live in Rochester for about 6 to 7 years post-college, and I'm really thrilled to bring in to the conversation Bob Duffy. Bob, thank you so much for joining.
Sure.
Um, and Bob is currently the president and CEO of the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. But the reason that you're here today is because you served two other extremely important roles in relation to this conversation, which is the mayor of Rochester from 2006 to 2011, and the lieutenant governor of New York State from 2011 to 2015. And during that time, I know that you were not the originator or in the original conversations about what we're calling Paetec Park. I know it's gone through a lot of iterations since then and has had many different names, but you did come into the mayoral position before it opened, correct?
Yes, correct. I was there for the actual grand opening in 2006.
And there's a lot of parallels between White Stadium and Paetec Park. Are you okay if we call it Paetec Park? I know it's not called that anymore,
Yeah.
but that's how I remember it. There's a lot of parallels and there's a lot of differences. And I think what you can bring to this discussion to help people of Dorchester kind of get a better perspective on why did something like that not go well? Why can it go well? And what are the differences here with White Stadium that maybe they can learn lessons from, or maybe not be as concerned about as they are today. So before we get into that, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, grew up in Rochester, grew up in the west side, actually the same side of the city where the stadium was built and still is. Started my career in 1976. Hate to say it, the Rochester Police Department. I was in college at the time. Um, Actually, was a junior going into my senior year at a Division III school in New Hampshire, and took the police test on a lark that year. I was working for the city recreation, running a basketball league, and I was notified I'd be hired later that fall. So I had to decide to go back to school or not. I decided in the end, I stayed, started that career, and uh, went up. Very lucky in that career. In 2006, I actually finished, ran for mayor, but up through the ranks. 19 think it was 1998 through 2005. I was the chief of police. And then in 2000, and I retired in actually late 2004, beginning of 2005. Then I was urged to run for mayor, which I was against, and so was my family. But I did, very happy to get elected, and I served one full term, had no opponent my second term, and then was asked by the then former governor of New York State, Andrew Cuomo, to be his running mate for lieutenant governor. Uh, in true disclosure, I think I said no for the first 20 minutes. The next 45 minutes was pressure being put out by the former governor. So I eventually relented, ran, and served 4 years with the governor his first term. And, while it was a very different job, he treated me like a full partner. And the things you've heard since, I did not see or did not exist back then. And I learned a great deal and met great people around the state. So you travel a lot. I always say governors fly, lieutenant governors drive. I learned that New York State is a very big state.
It is.
When you're in the car driving from city to city and town to town, but I'm very lucky. And then I started with the Chamber of Commerce, would have been in 2015. Been here ever since. I have a great team, and I'm out of politics, which I'm very happy to be. But I still get to interact, and I work closely with elected officials and business leaders. So very lucky to be really part of a great team and a great community.
Well, I remember every time I go home to visit family, how long New York State is. You hit Albany and you're not even halfway there, so I can relate to your your
Yes, you're
drive.
absolutely correct.
So set the stage for us a little bit. So you came into the mayor position, and this was already in progress. So you were picking up, and where was it when you picked up?
Well, I remember the contentious issues because when it first came up, it started with the soccer league at that time, which I think the Rochester Rhinos were playing. They wanted a stadium just for soccer because they were playing before in a stadium, our minor league baseball team, our Red Wings. So they were kind of sharing the use of that stadium. The league wanted a soccer only stadium, which started discussions. There were two very powerful leaders in the state, a state senator, Mike Nozzolio, who wanted this new stadium to be out in the town of Gates on the west side, outside the city. A very powerful assembly member, David Gant, who has since passed away, wanted it in the city in a challenged neighborhood near the baseball stadium, but on the west side. So a little bit of back and forth. In the end, David Gant won out. The state, I think the stadium was $30 million to build. The state provided about 23 to 24 million. The rest was made up by the city and also the soccer team. And the stadium was built, and then it opened. When it started, all these issues, I was in my police career at that time. Came into City Hall and I was proud to be at the grand opening of the stadium. A absolutely beautiful structure in 2006. I believe it was June 2006. And it went off. And I have to say this: the stadium is beautiful. Very well done. I've been to soccer games, football games, concerts, drum and bugle corps events as mayor and afterwards there. Uh, have never seen nor had a problem at the stadium, but as I'll be happy to discuss, I think one of the challenges eventually that came was the perception of safety that existed in that neighborhood. And over the course of time, I really believe it did impact, aside from other things that happened, but it did impact eventually people wanting to come down to attend events.
So let's step back and look at David Gant's reasoning for why city positioning was so critical. There were a lot of pros that he was focused on. That area in particular, a lot of areas of Rochester have some lovely facilities and stores and areas, but that area in particular was not very well developed, if I remember correctly. And he really wanted the economic boost for it. I think the argument against that, and you can tell me if I'm remembering this right, was if you build them, they will come is a not necessarily a guarantee, right? So if we put it in a spot where people aren't, will they come out for that? So
You-
talk
You're
about those two
correct.
sides.
The area the stadium was built was, I would say, on a cusp of an industrial area, but also bordered a neighborhood. In a neighborhood, I mean, I grew up not too far away from there. I rode my bike there as kids and certainly served there in my police career. It's a great old Rochester neighborhood. It had issues, certainly poverty, a lot of issues that we see in cities across America. But David Gant's thought was build this, create jobs for the neighbors that can come in and whatever jobs the stadium would create and really help with a revitalization. So his thoughts and strategies were honorable. Senator Zolio wanted it out in the town of Gates off of Route 490 interstate. His thought was large piece of land, easy access off expressways for people. And really both had good ideas. I think both, neither one was dishonorable. I don't think Senator Zolio wanted outside the city for any anti-city reasons, nor did David Gant want it in the city for any anti-suburban
Mhm.
or party lines. The senator was Republican, David Gant was a Democrat, so you have those issues that pop up. But in the end, it was selected to build it on its current site.
And was
Uh,
there parking included, Bob?
Pardon?
Was there parking included in the urban site?
It was. There's parking, pretty, well, I'd say a lot. I can't remember how large it was, but there was parking adjacent to it. And there's parking along the street. I mean, people would park on the street. There were always special events, police officers from the Rochester Police Department there. But you could always find parking nearby. There were a couple of restaurants nearby. And again, the intent was a good one. I would say in the end, did development happen because of the stadium? In the end, probably not. But it wasn't because of the stadium. I think that some development did occur, and some very positive things did happen in the neighborhood eventually.
Yeah.
But it goes back to it's not exact science, as you said. Build it and they'll come, or let them come and they'll build it. I do think when people attempt to do those things, their intentions are pure, honorable. Um, Sometimes they work out and have huge success. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah. I want to get into the funding side of it. You talked about the funding allocation and the split between the city and the state and private funding. The Boston project is heavily subsidized by the city. Um, Talk about how that worked out and how do you, if you were involved or if you're aware of how that split came to be, and were there issues getting funding from the committed parties throughout the project?
That's a good question. I believe with the power of the elected officials at the state level, David Gant from the Assembly and Mike Mazzolio, because eventually he agreed. And then My predecessor, Mayor Bill Johnson, was also involved with this. So New York State came through again with the money. I believe it was Governor Pataki would have been in office at that time. And so they came out of a $30 million project. They covered 23. The exact split between the soccer team, the Rhinos, and the city, I'm not really sure. The city did some infrastructure development there as well from 2004 to 2006 with the construction. But somewhere along the line, they split about a $6 million total between the two.
And I believe Paetec, who I believe became Windstream eventually,
Yes,
they had naming rights to the stadium. So they kicked in a portion of that to help cover their
they
naming
did.
rights.
I forgot what the exact amount was, but Paytech did get the naming rights, and they were really an up and coming large company at that time.
So the funding was mostly covered. It's so I was telling you earlier, it's so shocking to see the differences in funding between 20 to the early 2000s and 2025. Just the inflation and the changes in what things cost is shocking when you look at it in these terms. But the funding wasn't necessarily a problem because the state was willing to pay for so much of it. The location we've talked about. What about the ownership and maintenance? So the situation here in Boston will be that White Stadium will continue to be owned by the city. The soccer team, Legacy Football Club, will manage the maintenance long term. So they're leasing the stadium and they're covering the maintenance. Do you remember if that was the situation there?
Very similar. The city still owns the stadium to this day.
Mhm.
Back then, there was a sports group. I believe it was a combination of owners of the soccer team,
Okay.
also a group of sports management people. The name Frank DeRoss was the leader. Frank was from Utica. Frank was very knowledgeable, very talented executive. So, what the exact split was, I wouldn't recall what that would be, but they had, again, a contract to take care of the stadium, the maintenance.
Okay.
And every event I went to, I mean, it was pristine. There were things that weren't always finished. There were locker rooms that weren't completed. So even when it opened in 2006, I can't say it was totally completed. And even over the years, sometimes I'm not sure everything was completed because there were small things that weren't done.
Well, they had phased, I remember there was a development of like 25 luxury suites that they had intended to build. They ended up not building them with the initial, and I don't know if those ever got constructed.
They built some. I know that because the soccer team, which was very popular and really drew at that time a lot of people. And there still is a soccer team today that is playing in a game this weekend at the stadium. So it still goes on. But there was progressions. I think a lot of it comes down to funding, where their vision sometimes hit the reality of funding at that time. But it was an ongoing process. But having been there so many times, the field was it was pristine. It was a beautiful stadium, manicured. Having been there so many times and having been with people who have attended events there, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
The only thing was the big issue over the years is why is it so successful when they were at Red Wing Stadium? Why did things change a quarter mile away or so with the new stadium in terms of attendance? And that was a challenge over time.
So talk about that. You mentioned kind of the public safety perception. Talk a little more about that neighborhood and I think part of, Rochester's significantly smaller, obviously, than Boston, so it was relying on drawing in people from the suburban perimeter. Did they not feel comfortable coming into the city? Was that part of the problem?
Yeah, it didn't start off that way. I think over time it did. And I can't point to any one incident. Sometimes if some huge incident occurs, you can see where that would happen. There wasn't. I would say the perception often is much stronger than the reality when it comes to crime. And I can't think of one specific incident in that area when I was in office that would cause alarm. I mean, there's crime and there'd be car break-ins or people hustling or panhandling for money. But that area, the neighborhood, was primarily residential on one end. If you're going west, the east side was more commercial because it probably within two golf shots was Eastman Kodak, the Kodak office, Carestream, which was an offshoot of Kodak at that time, some smaller companies. So you had kind of a mix of both. People could walk over to the stadium for an event. Kodak was very close to Carestream, both at that time, much higher levels of employment than today. But I could see the vision, what they thought of back then. But I do think over time, and and probably even over the last several years, that fear perception has gone up dramatically. And
Mm.
Rochester certainly has its share of crime and poverty and challenges, like any city. But I can't point to and say that neighborhood was solely responsible. It was not. I mean, there's drug dealing, open air drug dealing, blocks away. It happens. Um, but again, it's more the perception where if people don't feel safe coming in, or if something happens, if they get approached walking in their car or coming from the stadium, sometimes they don't come back. If they get a parking ticket or have a bad experience, they don't come back. And that really has gone up. It didn't happen initially, but over the course of many years, even culminating in the last 2 or 3 years when our Section 5 is the local high school section for the state in terms of sports. They used to play their football championship games at Paetec Park, or it
Mm.
changed names over the years. And so high schools, different classifications would play their championship game there. I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago, might have been a little bit longer. Section 5 pulled out of the stadium. They started having those games at some of the SUNY campuses, the U of R, other colleges, even other high schools. And they did cite the concerns that parents and kids had of coming down to the stadium.
Yeah, that is a big part of this contract is that the BPS students will be able to have access to these world-class facilities, which is a huge pro. And nicely, this White Stadium is in a beautiful park that was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. I think that one of the concerns, obviously, this is always a concern with any development in a city like Boston, which has so much congestion, is parking and traffic.
Mhm.
Do you remember, Rochester's different, I'm going to acknowledge that right now, but do you remember any specific incidents with traffic? That is a tight area for driving in Rochester. So what was the result there from the stadium?
There would be from baseball to soccer. There would be some occasional tie-ups, but the cops always did a great job directing traffic, clearing it out. I've gone to baseball games and soccer games, and you might wait for 5 minutes, but parking was always available, and not only for the park, but these adjacent lots going back to Kodak and Carey Street, they're all fairly close. So, and people might choose to park on the street, which was usually free. And there's plenty of street parking. You could along actually it was Broad Street at that time. Um, but no, I don't think there was any concerns about tie-ups. The neighbors never complained about that. I think the neighbors look for opportunities, and there might be from tickets and concessions and things, jobs for kids. Having grown up on the West Side, anything at all, and summer jobs, part-time jobs are great opportunities. Um, I don't believe the neighbors ever complained. I don't believe the companies ever complained. Um, but from the start, I do think that perception was put out there about crime and safety, and maybe the location and gates might be a better one. I think that was played a little bit, not to the level that eventually happened down there, but I'm sure that was part of the conversation back then. There was quite a back and forth before this site was selected.
Yeah.
I kind of had a seat watching in the media, but I was not involved with those. And Mayor Johnson was an excellent mayor. He certainly is going to push for the city. If I was in office, the same thing. Although I have great respect for Senator Mazzoli, who's not in office but still here. I understood what he was trying to do. I knew the developer who owned the property, a great family in Rochester, the Galena family. But I think as a mayor, I would want it downtown. I would want it in
Yeah.
the city too. And so, so nobody, I guess the lack of success now, it's not dead. It's still alive. It's still going. But what the expectation was and hope in the beginning versus where it is today is nobody's fault. I think it's just a series of things that happen over time that maybe have eroded the confidence in the stadium, but it's still there, and they still host activities. Our current mayor, Mayor Evans, they use it quite a bit. I think it's a great facility. They could have knocked it down and had a company come in and build. They never did, and I don't believe that there's going to be a resurgence there. I don't. Um, but there have been people here that have floated out building another soccer stadium in another part of the city or out in suburbs. It has never really taken hold anywhere, but those discussions have taken place.
That's interesting. What did it do for employment? I mean, even if it never realized its full potential as hoped for, there had to have been an increase in jobs in that neighborhood.
I think construction to start with was a great thing, and
Yeah.
the city has always been very strong in trying to get as many jobs as you can to people in the neighborhood or the city. So I don't have numbers in front of me, but I do believe city residents, even people from that neighborhood, would have been involved in applying for some of those jobs, even if they weren't skilled laborers. There are things they could do to help. Other jobs popped up from concessions, ticket takers, security, things like that. The city has always given preference to city residents. And I think every mayor, every executive has tried to make sure that people in that neighborhood at least are given an opportunity if they want it to come in
Hmm.
and be part of it. The number of jobs I couldn't speak to, it's seasonal. It's like the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they're going strong for 8 or 10 games a year, and then the stadium is not really used other than for an occasional concert or
Yeah.
event. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like an ongoing string of employment opportunities, but when it was going, it did offer a lot. I remember I'm not a drum and bugle gore person, but I remember going to these big championships. The place was packed.
Yeah.
People from probably 4 or 5 different states coming in. And then I'll fast forward probably 2 years ago. My wife and I were at a restaurant, and I was approached by the owner who told me that one of the officials from the Drum and Bugle Corps said they're not going to go back to Paetec Park or Shallons, whatever it's called today, again, because of they had some incident and they were fearful. So I reached out to the mayor right away. By the time they ran it down, the person who was really in charge of that event said, "Oh no, we had no problem."
Hmm.
And somebody may have sensed something on the bus pulling away. There could have been some comments made. There were no assaults, robberies, thefts. But again, it takes on a whole life of its own sometimes if people say something. But when the owner of the restaurant mentioned that to me, I felt the duty to let the mayor know right away. He jumped right on it, and at least that issue was addressed. And that group is still coming back.
I think you bring up a good point, which is PR. For a while, I think it was very in vogue to hate on Paetec Park. Between that and the Fast Ferry, which were both around the same time, they were kind of the projects that failed in Rochester in the general zeitgeist, even if they weren't failures. And I think the media maybe fanned the flames a little bit at times. Do you feel like the PR was a problem?
I think the PR was a problem. I also think sometimes with developments, a lot more work has to go in preemptively, and I'm not so sure that always was done. When you have local developers and business leaders who want no part of something, and it's totally funded by the state, federal, or local government, you have to ask yourself why. And I think when you have a public-private partnership, there's a give and take on both sides. And I'm not so sure that's always taken place. And sometimes elected officials want to take credit and not share it. But a lot of elected officials who I know, most of all, have little or no experience in business at all or finance. And there really should be a public finance course for every elected official in terms of understanding that. I went to the Maxwell School for my master's, and I remember taking public finance, budgeting, long before I was police chief. But I mean, that's to me is the baseline
Yeah.
for things you have to learn. And then uh, in my role, I always think I've never been the smartest guy in the room, but I try and get people around me who are much smarter, much more experienced, and ask them. And even when I was mayor, I built a team that was phenomenal. I never asked what party they were from. I didn't care if they supported me or not in a campaign. I wanted the smartest, best people I could get. I have no problem leading, but I want to hear people. I want to get the expertise around a table to help guide us to the best decisions.
Yeah.
And I can't say that that always happened because it becomes a little political wrangling. Who's in charge? This is my project. Uh, and I found with major projects, you mentioned a couple, that sometimes people that should have been consulted or part of it may have backed away or weren't asked. And sometimes those who are on a table are working for the mayor, or the senator, the assembly member, and no one's going to say no or rain on a parade. And I think it's important for any executive. Fast forward to Boston and Dorchester, you would want to hear from those voices that disagreed, and you want to get the best minds around a table to get their opinions. Is this a good project? Is it a good
Yeah.
development? It sounds pretty positive, but you want to get people at the table, and there'll always be issues of traffic and the neighbors. And listen, any one of our neighborhoods we live in, we don't want more cars coming through, more people always. I don't care where you live. I get that. But then again, you can't stop progress. I think there's got to be a give and take. So you make the neighbors part of that process and hopefully get to maybe not a perfect point, but get to a point where you have a consensus.
Last question on this. Were you to go back and maybe be there when all of this started, so I know that you weren't at the time, but if you were able to put yourself in those initial conversations from start to finish on this project, what would you have liked to see done differently?
I would have done more work preemptively. I mean, I'm not a huge survey person. I've been in I have polls in politics. I would have taken a list of soccer fans and people that attend events, and I would have a survey, a public. I would pay for that. If the park is here, will you attend events? If yes, tell me why. If not, tell me why. I would look at that. I would do a much deeper study. I look at both locations because right now we think much more regionally. In Rochester, I think the city and county get along much better than they did back then.
Mm.
We have a mayor and a county executive that actually get along very well. We all work together very well. The old competition and even the political wrangling, it's pretty much a one party government right now, city and state. But the elected officials work pretty well together. Uh, but I would really have done a much more thoughtful deep dive in what is the best location. You want success, and there's different ways of thinking about that. And I think I would have done a little bit more of that. I would have looked at the cost estimate. I mean, the would 30 million cover it all? Obviously, you don't want to have a stadium or a home that's partially finished. You want to have it done. But I'm not sure that all the front end work was done back then. It never is because mayors, county executives, everybody's busy. It's on this project, on to the next one. But I think in retrospect, and I'm not a Monday morning quarterback, but knowing what I know now, seeing failures and successes, I think the work done up front, getting the right people around a table and really drilling down is one of the best ways to start off. Just make sure you're on the right point. And again, I would have, as a mayor, opted for that city location. But it came back where people said, no, I won't go there, but I will go out to Gates. Maybe that would have been the best location overall. And maybe it would have been more advantageous to keep it going. And because you want kids to come. Kids are a big part of soccer and all the leagues that you want them coming. You want their parents to bring them down. You don't want people not being unsafe, even feeling unsafe. And so I grew up in a city, lived there most of my life. I have friends that even officers who I dealt with growing up, I think police officers sometimes had a fear of neighborhoods that I'd ride my bike in, hang out with, played basketball, knew people on the street. There's different perspectives of people in any neighborhood or any city in terms of what will work and what won't. But it would have been a perfect, perhaps, initial steps. But I do think that public survey, a little more work, and making sure it's not politicized or not city versus county, but just think what is best. Back then, what people have felt is keep the stadium with the baseball stadium. People wanted it there. They can fill up that stadium. It's beautiful to this day, but soccer league didn't want that, and the
Yeah.
baseball team, it was a hit on them. But if it could have something built next to it, maybe right there, bought property side by side or done something, it would have had a much higher success rate than it does today. It's literally only a quarter mile away. I mean, you can walk there. You can see it from one to the next, and it's just who can figure human nature and why these decisions are made. But I would tell you today with this soccer championship game, they work so hard to push this. They'll get fans there,
Mhm.
but nowhere near what they could have gotten there had we not had to deal with all the perceptions.
Well, and I think that there's a tendency to think about development like that from a city by city perspective instead of regionally, and potentially regionally, if the stadium had been located in Gates, it still might have had knock-on effects for the rest of the region. So the city may have still benefited. We'll never know. But to your point, like if that's a better location and it continues to grow the entire region, maybe that would have been better.
No, I agree. You mentioned the fast ferry, and I feel bad because I'm the one that shut that down in 2006. Um, but it was a huge
For folks who
success.
don't know, in Dorchester, the Fast Ferry was a ferry service that went from the Port of Rochester to the Port of
That's right.
Toronto.
And it was filled up
Yeah.
every time the Yankees played the Blue Jays. And it was a great thing, and the former mayor did a great job putting it in place. But then a lot of other things that they hoped would happen didn't happen. And it goes back to, I think, planning ahead of time is so important, and getting as much information as you can. But your point is, if it started off, say, Senator Zolio was successful and was built at Gates off 490, it may have been successful. It may have not. Teams changed over the years, leagues changed. Um, but I do think today, given the perceptions, probably would have been an easier draw. But it's kind of sad too, because we're all about trying to uplift people and provide opportunities and access, and hopefully knock down some of these fears. I know Boston very well. I'm there every other month for a meeting.
Hmm.
Boston's a great city, I think my sense is it's going to have much more chance for success than Rochester. It's different the way it's set up. The population, traffic is always a problem. I get it always is, but I just think the way Boston is, and I always say, if I was starting over again, coming out of college, and I had to pick a place to live outside of my hometown, it would have been Boston.
We'd
Uh,
love to have you
yeah,
anytime.
it's a great city. It just is. Other than I'm a diehard Bills fan, and the
So am I, Bob.
Patriots
I'm
are.
trying to blaze a trail here. I'm starting a
Yep,
contingent.
yep, trying. But I do think wherever Boston would put it, it would probably be successful. I would think, and the neighbors, I get that part too, especially with Boston traffic. I'm usually from Logan to a hotel, into a meeting business room, 2 blocks away, then back to Logan. That's been my
And it
life.
still takes you 45 minutes to get there.
Yeah, it is. And I've gone with my kids and my family. We've toured it, walked around. I love the history. I love New England, and they do so many things so well up there. And I would say I was with a driver 2 weeks ago. He said, "City's safe." I mean, people feel Boston is safe. I have walked from restaurants back to the hotel at night. Pretty big group that goes out. Felt totally safe. I mean, it was like no one out. I was trying to get back to a Bills game one night when all my colleagues could care less. So I'm probably half a mile away from the hotel. I don't want to take Uber, so I'm walking. I'm going to walk out and have my phone going, and never felt unsafe at any point finding my way back there.
Yeah.
But I do think the thought process up to that point, I mean, going through the planning, I'm sure the mayor is heavily involved, and a mayor, a county executive, the council members. You want to make sure your neighbors and constituents are engaged and listened to. And you're never going to get people saying, "Hey, we all want this."
Right.
You'll never get 100% agreement, but just getting as much information as you can and making the best decision.
Well, I usually end this with one question, but I'm going to give you two because you have a unique perspective. So I'm going to ask you number one, what's your favorite place to go in Boston for food or drinks? And then I'm going to give you a chance to pitch Rochester to the Dorchester crew. So what's your favorite place in Rochester? We'll start with
Well, first of all, in Boston, we always go to the seaport. The last restaurant was Moo, which is near the seaport. So I'm on a board, so we walk, and the person that gets the restaurants always picks great ones. We stay at the Intercontinental Hotel, so we always kind of walk or Uber from there. But there are so many restaurants to pick from. There's some right next to the hotel. You could walk. I've never had a bad meal in Boston ever. And for Rochester, I would say we're much smaller. It's a foodie city.
it
You
is.
hear about the garbage plate. That's kind of a funny thing. I've had too many of those in my life. But you could pick any kind of food. I mean, we have so much diversity here in terms of food, ethnicity. There are great restaurants everywhere in the city, outside the suburbs. And right now, with staffing, sometimes they're closed on Sundays, closed on Mondays, closed on Tuesdays. Getting people back to work post COVID is not the easiest thing. But we have the Strong Museum of Play, which is one of the best museums for kids. For those in Dorchester, if you have children, you come a gorgeous hotel right next to it. You can spend an entire day in there, and it's unimaginable. It's also uh, a toy hall of fame, so we can go back to whatever age you're at. You'll find something you love. we have beaches, but on Lake Ontario, but I want to also pitch the region. The Finger Lakes region is gorgeous. I just came back from Portugal. I spent 10 days in Portugal along the Douro River, which is a huge wine region, wine and olive trees. But the Finger Lakes, you have all these lakes, with six altogether. You have wineries, breweries, distilleries, gorgeous vistas. You can drive, you can be downtown Rochester having a meal, and you can within 45 minutes you're at the lakes. The region is fabulous. So you can get urban dining, walk through markets, you name it. Festivals, we're a city of festivals, and every 2 weeks there's a festival somewhere. But then going out to the Finger Lakes, we just love it. And if you're a hiker, biker, swimmer, boater, it's all around, and no different. The seaport, the water around Boston. I mean, Boston's on the water. I mean, so I think you have to love the water in Boston. You'll love the water here. We're on Lake Ontario, a little smaller than the Atlantic Ocean, but we're on Lake Ontario, not too far from Erie, and the lakes you can't beat. So,
You forgot our biggest jewel in Rochester, Wegmans.
oh, I get to that one. I went to Wegmans, and my mother walked me in. My first Wegmans at probably 4 years of age. With all due respect to Amazon and Jeff Bezos, I cannot shop in Whole Foods. I'm a Wegmans boy. I go there everywhere I go. I have family in DC. I used to have to bring things down there. Now they have one in Rockville. They're in Maryland. They're in North Carolina. I know they're in Boston.
Yep.
I know they're one in Boston. They closed one, I believe.
We've got a few. We've got one in Newton, Chestnut Hill, and some in like Dedham area. So yeah, there's
it's the Wegman family is one of the greatest families. They are not only great business leaders, great philanthropists. They do so much for our communities, and they're just great people. So I'm a huge Wegmans fan. And Wegmans, I say you're right. It was for the longest time a tourist stop. Anybody coming to Rochester, we had a senior golf tournament here. The PGA was here in 2023. We have Oak Hill, one of the best golf courses in the country, 52 in the world, I might add, is here. But we had a 2023 PGA here, and we had I think it was a 2021 senior PGA. And the previous champion, I had to escort to two places: Nick Tahoe's for a garbage plate, Wegmans for a tour. And if you go to the Wegmans flagship store, Monroe Avenue in Pittsford, if you could find a parking spot within 100 yards, God bless you. But it's the most unique place. It is. And I will say this about Wegmans. With all the national brands, I buy Wegmans brands as much as I can for one reason. I trust them. So anybody in Boston, and I would also say, I hate to say this, I apologize to a group recently. I'm reading the Bill Belichick book right now. Is that North Carolina? It's interesting so far. But the years of Tom Brady and Belichick being the Bills, it was painful.
It was painful, and now it's they're just desserts, right? It's the
Yeah, listen, it's turned around, but not forever, because
not forever.
Boston
We have to
will.
gloat while we can, Bob.
Yeah, I tell you what, every team they have is always tough. Even the Patriots had very few wins. They always played the Bills tough, and then during the Brady years, it was the opposite. And but again, it shows.
I'm nervous about Drake May, to be honest with you. He's looking pretty good.
Oh, I know. Listen, they're tough, and a new coach, Mike Vrabel, a great coach, a great player. But you know what? I love Boston. I really do, and I have great respect for it. I like the culture. Of course, I'm Irish American. Actually, my mother was born here. Everyone else came from Ireland, and I know the strong Irish connection to Boston, which I love. But that whole coast is beautiful, and I just think it's a great city, a great region, and they should be very proud. And whatever the decision is made for this stadium, I'm sure it'll be a good one.
Well, thank you so much. Really enjoy your perspective and taking the time to chat with us about your experience with stadium projects. Thanks a lot, Bob.
My pleasure. And the last thing I'll say is, go Bills.
I'm with you. Go Bill.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.